Good evening to everyone. So I'm Boss Batrai. Today I'm doing my perception and translation studies. Okay, what things have changed since I enrolled in this course, or how I have taken, or how I have understood so far about the theory of translation as well as its implementation in real life. So I'm Upas Batrai and my roll number is 7615100014. So, in the beginning, I used to think that translation is something that is more like transferring a message from one person to another person or translating from one language to another. That was my preliminary thought about it. I thought that in translation, the main aim or the main essence of the translations is to communicate the message. But what I realized later on, or later on that translation is much more than that. Translation is not only the word-to-word translation, because if we carry on doing the word-to-word translations like the artificial intelligence, so that's not gonna obviously carry the essence of what is in the social language or culture. That's what I realized. Or translating everyday text and the translating other academic text is different. Or it is not only like the Google translations. Or there is a lot of knowledge or ideas required while doing the translations. Otherwise, we may end up in these a few memes that were seen in the internet when translating from one language to another language. Um, like about well, the first picture that you can see over here was like, about the translation from Hindi to the English language. It says that eating carpet is strictly prohibited. So when it's gone on the word-to-word translation, or there are various other examples. So the what brought change, or what theories actually influenced me in terms of having this understanding. There are the various theories that I have gone through, and then the few of them, like the Peter Newmark's theory, when it talks about the nature of translation. Newmark in his essay entitled "No Global Communication Without Translation," where it talks about the very nature of the translation, which remains same despite the essence of the translation remains same despite we use this machine translation, or we use this technology, or in travel or in tourism, wherever the area is, the core essence of the translations remains the same. That idea of Newmark was quite interesting for me. Likewise, the Grossman idea, when he starts his essay article with an example, when he sees that the job of the interpreter actually makes one travel the world, or makes it easy for one to explore the world. But later on, he realized that translations is or interpretations is much more than that. Likewise, the seven methods of translation that was defined by Jean Paul Vinet and the Jean Darbrand, these thinkers, or let's say these scholars, their ideas mentioned in the methods of translation is another important areas that I really liked. Likewise, the principle of equivalence by Eugene Naira is another significant one when we talk about the translation. When he talks about the dynamic equivalence as opposed to the word-to-word translation, where word-to-word translation, where he highlights that no two languages, can be no, there cannot be exact translation because no two languages are identical. So it shows the difficulties inherited or embedded in the translation when he says that there can be no fully exact translation. Similarly, the more fascinating idea that I found is the idea of Benetti. When he says in his writing translations as cultural politics, he says he writes against the idea of domestication, or let's say domestication in English, where he counters the idea of domestications, which he characterizes as violence perpetrated by the perpetrated on the source culture by the target language or the culture. So he stands against ethnocentrism, racism, cultural narcissism, and imperialism when he talks about the translation, and focuses on that it should refrain the translation, the work of tasks of translation should refrain from all these ideologies. So these are the quite influencing ideas that I found while interesting while going through the translation. So things I have learned while doing the translation during this course, the first few months, we have translated few prose text as well as the piece of poetry. We have also done legal text translation and the economic text translation. And what I realized is that prose text, while translating the prose text, it was much easier. I found that all right, so it's not that much difficult, or it is something that can be done. I realized that okay, finding equivalence is one important thing while doing the prose text translation, but that idea didn't last long. When I had to translate a piece of poetry where finding equivalence was alone was not enough, was not sufficient, the in-depth knowledge of the both source language and the target language is found important. So again, on top of that, the idea of form versus the content, or whether it should focus on the form or the content, or whether one can sacrifice the form or content in terms of another, I mean, for the sake of another. So that I realized while doing the piece of poetry. And when I did the legal text and the economic text, that was much more different. I mean, the appropriate or the equivalent jargons and the equivalence, finding it in the target language was more difficult or more important while doing the translation. So the thing that I want to take away after reading this course that I realized was, to have a knowledge of another language or to translate into another language is like possessing a second soul, as Charlemagne has said. To have another language is to possess a second soul. So that's what I have found. And to sum up, what it has reminded me, the one essay that we were assigned while we were in this school level or the college level, that there was a work of House that again an essay by the Rosenblatt, where he says that about the few errors, when few verbal errors, where he talks about the mistranslation and where "come alive with Pepsi" is translated in German as "come alive out of the grave with the Pepsi." So to sum up, what I have realized is that artificial intelligence, like translation, may help in everyday life in communication, but it could bring actually a disaster if you applied in academic writing or in professional translation. So professional translation or academic translation should be different, or should carry the very sense, should do justice to both source language and the target language. And then having a good knowledge of either source language alone or the target language alone is not sufficient for one to be a good translator, to do a good translation. This is all from my side. Thank you very much for this, for your time.